Hi, I'm Tom with EV Universe, and today we are going to do a long-term test review on the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Now, full disclosure on this particular review that this car is mine, so all of the dirt and the car seats and all of those things I use every day. And I've put about 25,000 miles on this car in about a year and a half. Now, if you've been following our channel for any length of time, you know that I've done a lot of different content videos on the Ford Mustang Mach-E just because it's simply easy for me because I have access to it. But this is the first time we're actually going to dive in deep and talk about this car at length and what I really think about it. If you clicked on this link trying to get the too long, don't read version of the review, on the whole, I've been very pleased with this car. It is my first EV, so I came into this eyes wide open, expecting there to be some differences, expecting there to be, some sacrifices being made, but on the whole, I've been really pleasantly surprised. Prior to the Mach-E, I had a 2020 Ram 1500. That Hemi, the 8-speed transmission of that vehicle was just pristine, and I absolutely loved that truck. I was really worried that I was going to miss the V8 rumble, but as soon as you step on the accelerator with an electric car, you really forget about that V8 rumble. And you just have silent pull. It's kind of like being in an airplane and taking off. So a little bit more about this particular Mach-E. This is the Select. At the time when I purchased mine, I was not able to order anything but the Select or the GT, even though Ford produced a premium and a California Route 1, which would be those mid-tiers. Those models weren't available because of supply chain issues. Now with the Select, you are stuck with the standard range battery, so you're looking at the 70 kilowatt hour battery that gave a range brand new of about 220 miles. For 99.9% of the driving that I do on a daily basis, that is more than enough range. I typically will put on maybe 100 to 150 miles a day, which is broken up into a couple separate trips. And when I am not driving, I'm charging. And so every time I leave my house with this car, I've got my battery topped off to 90%, which is the Ford recommended charge settings. Right now, that we've been driving for a couple minutes, it's down to 88%, and it gives me an expected range of 180 miles, which, like any EV, that's going to change with temperature. The colder it gets, the hotter it gets, the more you might run into range loss because you're having to deal with heating and cooling your battery as well as heating and cooling your cabin. One of the disadvantages that the Mach-E has, especially in the wintertime, is for heating the car. It uses like a standard, think of like a quartz ceramic type heater. But that's what's using the electricity to heat the car to keep it up to temperature. Some other vehicles like your EV6 and your Teslas, they have heat pumps which are more efficient, use a lot less electricity to get your cabin temperature comfortable. But the downside there is that your heat pump isn't going to be as effective when it gets really, really cold outside like it gets in northern Michigan. I have found the range estimates on the car to be extremely accurate, if not a little bit conservative. So I don't have a range anxiety issue where I all of a sudden think that I have 50 miles of range, but the car only drives 20 before it runs out. That's not the case. I would say that the Mach-E is very true to its range expectations when you pull out of the driveway. I have taken a couple of separate trips with this car, 4 to 6 hour drives for the most part. I will have to stop at fast chargers, and that is the one downside to the Mach-E. This Mach-E with the standard range battery is the road tripability of it. You really are hindered by the lack of range. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on charging curves and things along those lines, but when you're looking for charging stations, you're not going to want to drive the car much below 20% of its battery in order to make sure you're going to get to that destination charger safely. And then once you're on a fast charger, it's typically recommended to charge up to 80%. And the big reason behind that is to do with the charging curve speed of DC fast charging above 80% drastically slows down, and it really doesn't make a ton of sense to sit at one of those unless you absolutely have to have that extra charge to get to your next destination. So effectively, you're working with 60% of your battery in between stops with this particular car. And if we just do quick math on that, you're talking about 120 miles in between charging stops, which doesn't get you very far going down the road. I would expect that that extended range battery, which is going to get you that extra 50 miles, is going to make it a little bit more palatable. Or even if you're looking at another car with a more significant range that's upwards of 300 miles. That's going to make a big difference on road trips. If you're not road tripping it, don't worry about it. And I talked a little bit about my previous vehicle before this. Before that, it was another Ram 1500, a 2016 version. And then I had a Silverado pickup before that. That was a 2014, and then a Tahoe, and other big gas vehicles. That's kind of always been my go-to. And I was really nervous about the functionality of not having that truck bed behind me, which that's another whole video. But with those big trucks, you kind of go blind to the shifting points of the transmission and the ride quality and steering and braking and all of the things that come with driving a bigger vehicle. And the thing that I really did not expect to have happen with an EV was how smooth and peaceful the drive is. And you don't have those shifting points on the transmission to contend with. So it's a constant steady pull of the acceleration. And the one pedal driving, which on the Mach-E you can turn off if you want a more traditional feel. But when you start to come up to a stop sign with the Mach-E, all you're doing is letting off the accelerator, and the car is slowing at a consistent rate with what would be a normal braking, which is what I'm doing right now. You don't have to touch the brake pedal. The car comes to a stop, and it's going to hold itself here until we're ready to go again. We hit the accelerator. So I'm not in a situation where I have to keep my foot on the brake before we take off to go after traffic clears the light turns green. Oh, it's so fast. Now I hit on the practicality of the one pedal driving, but if you're not familiar with what it's actually doing, it's using the motors that are powering the car to go down the road to slow the car down, and ultimately acts like a generator to put electricity back into your battery pack, so you're not wasting that energy in terms of heat in the brakes, but it's getting thrown back in through the motors and generating electricity, which honestly is really, really smart. Ride quality in this vehicle is great. It can be a little bouncy because it does have more of a sporty feel to the suspension, but I really do appreciate that sporty feel. I have driven the Model Y, I've driven the Kia EV6, and I think that this vehicle feels far more solid and capable in the corners as compared to those other cars, which would be in a similar category to it. And I do want to circle back around to winter driving, which is something that I know that EVs catch a lot of hate for, but this Mach-E in particular has been hands down the best car that I have ever driven in snowy, icy roads, bar none. I've driven Tahoes, I've had all-wheel drive Chargers, the Ram, the Silverados, I've driven a lot of cars, even Subarus. This thing is incredible. And I attribute that to, one, its weight, and two, its all-wheel drive, and three, the traction control system, which is powered by the motors, which compared to a gasoline vehicle, the motors are constantly assessing traction, and they're constantly evaluating where power is being put to what wheels. And it's a way more intuitive, a way simpler process for an electric motor to do that to each wheel than it is for a ICE vehicle that has essentially using its ABS braking system to divert power to each wheel. So if you're worried about the performance of that, don't be. It is an incredible misnomer that EVs are bad in the snow. Now, you will see range loss. Depending on your outside temperature, you might see upwards of 20 to 40% range loss when you're driving an electric vehicle in the winter, at least the Mach-E. And I did see days when it was really cold where I saw a 40% range loss. Now, that happened because I didn't precondition the car. Now, with preconditioning, essentially what you're doing is you're heating up the car's cabin and the battery from your home charging outlet. So if your car is plugged in at home when you're not driving it, which you probably always should be doing, You can set your car to leave at 7:30 in the morning, and your car is automatically going to warm itself up to the correct ambient temperature inside the car and the battery pack, and it's going to do that off of the electricity coming from your home. Now, once your car is unplugged and you're driving, all the car has to do now is maintain that temperature in the cabin and inside of the battery. Whereas if you don't precondition your car and you just get in and you start to drive, now all of the electricity that's going to be taken from your battery to heat your cabin and heat your battery is going to be pulled from the battery. And I think the simple math there is obvious that it's going to reduce the range because it uses a lot of power to do that. But even on our coldest days, when temperatures were into the negative degrees Fahrenheit, we never had an issue with the car not functioning. It always started, it always drove. You might lose some miles, but it's going to get you where you need to go. Now, as far as passenger space in the vehicle, this is a 5-seat vehicle. It is tight for 5 people. I have 2 car seats in the back, one for my 5-year-old and the other for my 7-year-old. And then my 14-year-old, if the 5 of us are in the car, has to squeeze into that back middle seat, which she doesn't love, but it's very rare where the whole family is in this car together. But it is possible. I think the utility cargo space is ample. It's to be expected. I'm not hauling around 4x8 sheets of plywood, but I have put some 8-foot 2x4s through the back hatch with the passenger seat reclined and whatever. It'll fit if you get creative. Also, what I think is a kind of a gimmicky selling point about the Mach-E is the frunk, and that the frunk has a drain plug in it so that you can use it as a cooler. And yes, I have done that, and it worked out pretty well. And I do kind of love it for traffic, because if we need to make a quick turn and get on it, the all-wheel drive and the traction control and the speed of this thing just launches. I have a lot of fun driving this car. For an otherwise crossover SUV, like, it's fun. Definitely doesn't drive like an SUV. At least no SUV I've ever driven that I think is a real SUV. And really, a lot of this car, it's just a car. Once you strip away the fact that it's an electric vehicle and some of the quirks that come with owning and driving an EV, like the one-pedal driving and stuff like that, once that's kind of behind you, it's really kind of basic. You got a push-button start, and you got a dial knob for a gear selector, normal steering wheel, and you kind of just forget that it's electric. You also kind of forget about gas prices, and I've never been late for anything because I needed to stop to get gas. So that's cool. You know, things I don't miss, the Ram that I was driving, about the same amount of miles as this, I was spending about $400 a month in fuel. Obviously that fluctuates with gas prices, but the same amount of driving in this car, I'm spending about $60 a month in electricity, and my electric rates don't fluctuate. I'm paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's just what it is. Obviously, that $60 a month has increased my electric bill at my home, but to me, that is a small price to pay when I'm saving that much in gasoline. Don't mind me while we're out running our errands here together today while we talk about this car. But one other, I guess, quirky thing that's specific to an electric vehicle with one-pedal drive is car washes. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that you can't go through a car wash because the electric batteries are going to get ruined and stuff like that, but that's not the case. For the Mach-E, at least, we have to turn off our one-pedal drive, and we have to turn off the auto hold when you go through a car wash that operates on a conveyor belt, which is where I have my membership. So making sure you do that, otherwise the car is going to find itself not wanting to move forward, but the belt wants to pull you. But once you're in the car wash, it's back into neutral just like normal, and we're gonna get our car clean. I also really wish that I had a sunroof. Ford had it with the GT version, but like I said at the time, I could only get the GT, which for me would have been like an $8,000 upgrade, which if I could afford it, I would have done it, but I couldn't, so I didn't. So looking back, knowing what I know now, comparatively speaking, I still think I would have bought this Mach-E given where we are at time-wise. I bought this in the kind of the peak of the EV prices. where you couldn't find one on the lot. And when I bought this car, I probably could have turned around and flipped it and made a few $1,000s just because of the way the market was, where used ones were selling for significantly more than a brand new one if you could get it. Now I'm probably very much upside down in this car. So you can pick up a used Mach-E for pretty inexpensively, and if you can do it, I would. Make sure you go through your standard reviews. If you get to our evuniverse.com website, there is a checklist for each make and model on things that you want to keep an eye out for to make sure that they're good and in check, right? So I think that's one of the more discouraging things that I found with owning this vehicle. And it really has nothing to do with the vehicle. This has to do with the market and the pricing. And when Ford drops its prices to compete with Tesla dropping its prices, and we end up in this price war, you know, it's the guy that bought his car 6 months ago that's going to be hurting when they can't sell it. I think right now, in early to mid 2024, when I'm filming this video, if I were able to get out from underneath this Mach-E, I would. And I would find myself into something with 3 rows, either the Kia EV9 or the Rivian R1S. But it just doesn't make sense right now with the way prices are fluctuating. And talking about how peaceful it is to drive, you know, right now I'm in stop and go construction detour traffic, and I'm just kind of feathering the accelerator, not having to go back and forth between accelerator and the brake, or even take it a step further if you got a car with a manual transmission, which I'm not hating on a manual transmission. I've got one too. It's just so peaceful just to keep your foot in one spot. And maybe that makes me sound soft. It probably does. But once you experience and get used to it, it's really noticeable. And it's kind of a luxury that I really didn't expect to benefit from. So some of the horror stories that you might hear about the Ford Mustang Mach-E relate to the high voltage junction box going bad. That is something that has been fairly well reported and recalled through the 2021s and the 2022 model years. The 2023s have been corrected, and there haven't been any issues of it that I'm aware of. Definitely not with mine. So far for service on my vehicle, I did have to have the windshield replaced due to a rock chip at about 6,000 miles. And that worked really smoothly through my insurance company. I was able to make the claim, and then a remote company came out through, I think, SafeLight, and replaced the windshield in my garage. They were able to do the calibration and everything needed to happen right there on site, and it took, you know, less than an hour, and I had a new windshield in the car. Within the last couple weeks, there was a recall that was done on the vehicle by a remote Ford technician who came out to recalibrate the door control module. Again, that was all software-based, but they actually had to touch the car to do that, and they did it in my driveway. Aside from that, that's it. I put in washer fluid, rotated tires, which I'm still on my original set of tires at 25,000 miles, which they are probably getting questionable at this point, maybe a little sketchy, and I should be replacing them definitely before next winter, if not sooner. But that's, you know, another conversation. And wearing out tires quickly is something that I anticipated, and the fact that I'm still at almost 25,000 miles with the original set of tires as vibrantly as I drive this car, I think is saying something good. Brakes we haven't touched, and I don't expect to touch those, at least while I own this vehicle. They are expected to go up around 100,000 miles on this set of brakes because typically we're using the one-pedal driving and rarely using the brakes. There are a handful of accessories that I put in it. I've got the 3D Max Spider floor mats for both the first row, second row, and in the trunk area. A couple cosmetic things here or there, which could take it or leave it. If you're looking for the summary, feel good, bring this all together, like, I like this car. The car does exactly what I've asked it to do, and then some. It's got just enough creature comforts to make it feel a little bit luxurious, but it's not crazy. It doesn't do anything super fancy. It's got a 360 camera. It has Blue Cruise, which is really cool. I enjoy that on the freeway where you have the hands-free driving. Blue Cruise uses the cameras and radar sensors on the car. It detects where the car is within the lane, and it also detects the vehicle in front of you. So it's going to match the speed of the vehicle in front of you and obviously keep you centered in the lane where you're driving. It only works on mapped freeways, which is a lot of freeways. Where I live, In northern Michigan, I'm an hour away from my closest freeway, so I don't get on it very often to use it. So if it came down to where I had to pay for it via subscription, I just simply wouldn't, because it doesn't make sense for me. I don't use it, but maybe more than 3 times a year, if that. But that same technology exists on every other road while you're using the adaptive cruise control. So it does give you a sense of a driver assist, but the technology requires you to have your hands on the wheel, and the car can tell when you're not holding the wheel, and it gives you alerts to hold the wheel if you're not. But even with that assist, the car is detecting the yellow line, your white line, and it will help steer around corners if maybe you're not doing it quick enough. At no point is this any way remotely to look like full self-driving or autonomous driving or anything of the sort. You still have to navigate, you still have to decelerate, turn, all those things. But those driver assist features are really helpful. And it adds to the peaceful driving experience.